What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G and the Samsung Galaxy A23 4G. If you want to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But without further ado, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A24, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. With the A23, we're getting a slightly larger 6.6-inch 90Hz PLS TFT display, and this phone also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 400, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So in general, these displays are pretty similar, and in general, they both are pretty nice displays. So if you're consuming a lot of content, whether you're reading, watching videos, whatever you may be doing, you will get a good experience with either phone. That being said though, of course, there are a couple differences here. On one hand, with the A23, at again 6.6 inches versus 6.5 with the A24. The A23 is a tiny bit larger, so if you do want the larger display between the two, definitely keep this in mind. But honestly, I feel like side by side, the difference is really not that significant. And on the other hand, with the A24, I feel like the image quality is quite a bit better here. Again, we are getting a Super AMOLED versus a PLS TFT, and as you can probably tell, the Super AMOLED is a bit brighter, the colors are a bit richer and more vibrant, and the viewing angles are quite a bit better. So if you're maybe like outside in the sun, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, the A24 will be a lot easier to see. So if you want a slightly larger display, again, the A23 will have an advantage, but if you want better image quality, you will want to go with the A24. But like I said before, either way, both phones do have really nice displays, so if that is important to you, either phone here will be a great choice. Now for storage, both phones have 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so no difference here, but keep in mind, for more entry-level 4G phones, 128GB is definitely a decent amount of space. Now, sure, of course, there are going to be people out there who use that up real fast, but to put this into perspective, I personally use my own iPhone 13 to record all the videos on this channel, and it does have 128GB, and since it's an iPhone, it doesn't even have microSD card expansion, and right now I'm personally using up maybe half of my storage, and I want to say I probably record more videos than the average user, so the point here is, I feel like most people are really not going to need that much more than 128GB. And remember, both phones here do support microSD card expansion, so if you do have a lot of photos and videos, for example, or maybe music or files in general, you can offload that stuff onto a microSD card, and it will definitely make a difference. For security features, like pretty much every Samsung Galaxy A series phone, both phones here do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys. But starting with the A24, let's give them a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. And now for the A23. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well, no issues at all. And again, remember, both phones have Face Unlock too, so definitely nice to get both options. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the A24, up front, we got a water drop notch design for the selfie camera, and same with the A23 for that matter, but as you can see, they kinda did change the design a bit, and I feel like the A24 looks a tiny bit better. Like you may have heard me say in other videos, I'm really not a big fan of water drop notch designs. I feel like the look is kinda outdated, but again, between the two, the A24 does look a bit more modern. Now with this phone, the selfie camera is 13 megapixels, so definitely not bad. And on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. With the A23, the selfie camera here is 8 megapixels, and on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So really the only difference here when it comes to features is, again, the A23 has a depth sensing camera and the A24 doesn't, but really keep in mind this doesn't matter a whole lot. In case you don't know what it's for, this camera is basically just for portrait mode, and with the A24, it's really just built into the main camera. So in the grand scheme of things, the features we get with each phone are pretty much the same. Now to give you an idea of what each phone can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. So overall, pretty good quality for what it is. If you compare it to a much higher end phone, obviously the higher end phone is going to be quite a bit better, but I feel like for the average user, for things people are typically taking photos for anyway, the camera here will definitely get the job done. I mean, on maybe Instagram or really any kind of social media platform, the photos are going to be perfectly fine, and then if you're doing something like maybe Snapchat where the quality doesn't really even matter, sending photos to friends and family, or maybe just taking photos for your own memory, no matter what the case may be, for an entry-level phone, I do think the camera here is pretty impressive, and for most people it will be plenty good enough for whatever you might be doing. And then here's some pictures taken with the A23, and with this phone throughout the year or so I've had it, I've always thought the photo quality here was pretty impressive. So in general, pretty much the same kind of thing. For a more affordable phone, it definitely does get the job done. So if you're looking for something that's maybe not the most high-end device out there, but you still want the option to take a nice photo when you need to, I do think either phone here will be a great choice. And then for video, also keep in mind, both phones have a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K here. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G99 processor. With the A23, this phone also has 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 680 4G. Now when it comes to overall performance between the two, first of all, I do want to point out, even with the A23, when it first came out, this phone was actually surprisingly fast for what it is. But with the A24, this phone is actually even faster, and for a 4G phone especially, I mean, performance-wise, this phone actually beats out some entry-level 5G phones, which, again, for what it is, I was really not expecting this. So in general, between the two, if you do want the faster phone here, definitely go with the A24, but for basic daily activities, the A23 will still get the job done just fine. So if performance is maybe not that important to you, but you at least want something decent, the A23 will still be perfectly fine. I ran a benchmark test on each phone here using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see here, there is quite a difference, with the A24 scoring significantly higher. So again, if you do want the faster phone here between the two, then definitely go with the A24, and like I said before, even compared to some entry-level 5G phones, based on these scores and in my personal experience, this phone is definitely in that general ballpark. So if you do want a fast phone, but for whatever reason you don't want a 5G phone, or maybe you just found a good deal on this phone and don't care, either way, if 5G connectivity is not important to you, then when it comes to performance, the A24 is a great option. And again, like I said with the A23, despite being significantly slower in comparison, for basic activities, this phone will still get the job done. So again, if performance is maybe not that important to you, but you still want something that's at least not super slow, this phone will be a pretty good choice too. Now when it comes to the battery, these phones are exactly the same, both having 5000 mAh batteries and supporting 25W fast charging, so definitely great batteries here. With 25W fast charging, the charging speed will be pretty good, but of course keep in mind to actually fully utilize this, you will need a 25W charger, which neither one comes with, so you will have to get one yourself. Aside from that though, a 5000 mAh battery is a really large battery, so if the battery life and longevity is important to you, either phone here will be a great choice. Now both phones do have Android 13, which is definitely nice to see, but keep in mind with the A24 being a year newer, this phone will get one extra major update, so this phone will be getting Android 14, 15, 16, and 17, whereas with the A23, this phone gets Android 14, 15, and 16. Now, honestly, maybe not a huge difference, because I feel like when it comes to phones like these, a lot of people might be getting a new one every year or maybe every 2 years, so this is really only going to matter if you keep your phone for multiple years, because in that case, if you're going to keep it for the full 4 years or so, the A24 will have an advantage. But again, the A23 is going to be getting 3 more major updates, so definitely not bad either. In addition to this, both phones do have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you won't have to worry about that. And to my surprise, the A24 actually still has a headphone jack. Now it's not that the A23 didn't either, but with this series, I feel like every year the A20 whatever gets a little bit higher end and nicer, and when it comes to nicer phones, Samsung has been doing away with headphone jacks. For example, starting with the A53 5G, those phones don't have headphone jacks anymore. Same with the A33 and the A34. And I feel like this is really too bad, because even though, yeah, wireless headphones are a lot more popular these days, it's nice to have the option to use normal wired headphones without having to get an adapter. So I am glad to see this phone does still have a headphone jack. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, to be perfectly honest, aside from the performance and maybe a slight difference in the display, I feel like these phones are really just not that much different. Sure, the design is different, and depending on your personal preferences, you might like one of these better than the other. But again, aside from the relatively noticeable performance difference, and the display with the A24 being a little bit nicer with the Super AMOLED versus, again, a PLS TFT with the A23, these phones are pretty much interchangeable. That being said though, I do want to point out that with the A23, when this phone first came out, I think I paid like $249 for it. So despite being still, I guess, relatively affordable, it's definitely not what I would consider cheap. On the other hand, with the A24, this phone is going for around $185 or so on Amazon. So despite being a bit nicer, the A24 is actually a bit more affordable too. So because of this, and because again the A24 does have a nicer display, and it is quite a bit faster too. Although even at this point in 2023, the A23 is definitely not a bad phone. I would still go with the A24 in pretty much every situation. Now keep in mind, neither of these phones to my knowledge is officially launched in the US. So if you are here and you want to get one of these, you will have to get it factory unlocked, which in my opinion is really all the more reason to get the A24 over the A23, because I feel like even the A23 is probably going to be around the same price. And again, objectively, the A24 is just better in pretty much every way where there's a difference, which is basically like 2 or 3 things. So yeah, although the A23 is definitely a decent phone for what it is, the A24 is definitely at least a bit of an improvement. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G and the Samsung Galaxy A23 4G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.